Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm your host, Hilmarie Hutchison, and today's guest brings a raw and powerful perspective on something many leaders don't talk about enough: loneliness, mental health, and the path to personal transformation. Nick Jonsson is the #1 global thought leader on executive loneliness, a TEDx speaker, a certified chief master coach, and the best-selling author of Executive Loneliness. Wow. In addition, he's also a top 1% IRONMAN triathlete and a powerful advocate for mental well-being in high-performing environments. Through his own journey with addiction and recovery, Nick now helps leaders around the world prioritize mental health, build resilience, and unlock their full potential without burning out. Incredible. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Nick, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much, Hilmarie. That was a wonderful welcome.
Well, you've certainly accomplished a lot. You've got a lot of people know you. But for the audience who don't know you, who might not have heard about your story, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I was born in Sweden, educated in Australia, and then I spent now the 20 plus last years in Asia. And you could say that I worked my way up the corporate ladder. And as you will hear today when we speak, I also hit my burnout, my rock bottom, and then I crawled back out of the ashes and rebuilt my life. So that's my journey in a very brief intro.
Wow, so you've also had experience from a lot of different countries: Sweden, Australia, and South Asia. You said South Asia or Southeast Asia?
It's mainly Southeast Asia, but I should say the last 1.5 years, I also done a lot of work in both Sri Lanka and the Maldives. So the territory is increasing.
Excellent. So let's jump right into it. What led you to speak out about executive loneliness and to share your own recovery journey so openly?
What I realized through my corporate career was that while I knew my colleagues, I even had barbecue with my bosses on the weekend, and we talked about everything about life, joking, having fun, but the culture of asking for help and speaking up wasn't really there. These days we call this psychological safety, and looking back, over the days, that was not the leadership. Leaders were powerful, strong, very directive, giving a clear direction and powering on and moving forward and pushing through. And when I had leaders and my bosses like that, that's basically became how I led as well. The issue with that was, of course, that, challenges came and adversity came, and I tried to sort it all out myself. So having suffered then through my career in this loneliness, once I left the corporate world, I was puzzled and I wanted to find out if others also went through that. So that's how it started. And I did a survey and eventually wrote a book on those findings.
Right. So your experience growing up or getting into leadership yourself was that leaders were these powerful people that you didn't really see below the surface. You couldn't see really what they were personally going through. And as much as you knew colleagues, that was more sort of a superficial relationship rather than deep conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the old traditional leadership style, the directive leader, as opposed to the coaching leaders that we have today, the ones who have humility and connection and so on. And that has changed over the years. And that really is a transformation that was very much needed. And it wasn't there when I climbed up the ladder. At least the bosses I had, they were not open. They were not coaching. It was my way or the highway kind of thing. And I formed to that. I hit the targets and I really worked hard. And I can remember, working evenings, late weekends and doing whatever it took. But sometimes I didn't have the answers. And that's when the issues became even bigger, because sometimes then I didn't dare to say that maybe I made a mistake here. And of course, that's even worse if we run a company with staff who are scared to speak up about the truth.
Looking still back at your journey, you have built a global reputation as a top executive coach, but your path wasn't always linear. What were some of the early signs that you were struggling with burnout or disconnection?
Again, looking back at my corporate career, I didn't work with coaches per se. I was given mentors in my organization, but those were more senior profiles, and I tried to impress them, if anything. I didn't dare to be vulnerable and open and highlight where my insecurities were. And because I didn't have any external coaches either to help me with the challenges, again, that led me feeling isolated, lonely, trying to find the answers myself. Once I realized that, the power of having a coach, someone who can help them, in this case, could have helped myself through my corporate career, would have made all the difference in the world. So that's why these days I'm working with other top executives in the similar kind of roles as I had, managing directors, vice presidents, CEOs, managing the big teams and big organizations, so that they feel supported, so they don't have to go through what I went through in my corporate career.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. There will be people in leadership positions that have sort of followed the path to get there, but without the opportunity or even to know that they should have a coach or that they could benefit from a coach. I think also you made a good point about you needing a coach outside the organization where you could really be open and vulnerable about what you are facing, because inside it doesn't make any sense if they're your bosses, because, you're not going to tell them the truth of what you're really struggling with. Sort of staying on this topic of vulnerability, I know this is something that you also talk about, that it's one of the most underrated leadership skills. What does it look like in practice for a leader to be vulnerable?
It doesn't mean that we come in and overshare. It doesn't mean that we come in on Monday morning and scream out about all the personal issues, the challenges, and the drama that might have happened externally. That's not what it's about. A vulnerable leader is someone who dare to say, I made a mistake. A vulnerable leader is someone to dare to talk to their colleagues and ask for help and say that, I don't know this, can you help me? Someone who really can highlight, these are my strengths, but these are my weaknesses, and ask the team to have their back and really be open. So that is what I see a vulnerable leader as. And it's something that we can develop. I talk a lot about the vulnerability muscle, almost like we're building a muscle at the gym. We can do that with vulnerability as well. And it's about practicing, speaking up and doing this in the right way, in a safe way. And in my work now, I do this on a one-on-one level with leaders. So they feel first safe to open up about the challenges with me on the call, so that they later on have rehearsed it and they can go and open up to their team, or also to prepare for the difficult conversations, perhaps with the leaders. What I found is that many of these executives might have issues that keep them awake at night, issues that they know they need to talk to the boss about, but because it's painful and they worry that the boss is busy, maybe they ignore these conversations. So as a coach, we can prepare for these difficult conversations so that they dare to be vulnerable.
Yes, for somebody who's never allowed themselves to be vulnerable to others, this might, as you say, will be a difficult transition to adapt themselves to that. And it takes practice. It doesn't just come overnight. I like how you said vulnerability doesn't mean to overshare your own personal dramas, but being willing to admit your own mistakes and your own limitations. One question I would have here, is there a risk with a humble leader, somebody who's willing to admit their mistakes, that they have difficulty with boundaries then, and that possibly they can be taken advantage of?
I think we have to be quite careful, because the corporate world can be a lot of backstabbing and people are chasing the next promotion, and especially today, it's so competitive and many layoffs are out there and so on. So we have to be careful of what we disclose and to who we disclose. So we keep coming back to here, choose your safe spaces. This may be your mentors externally with your organization. It can be with your coach externally, which you can have this conversation, perhaps a mastermind group, a peer group of other senior leaders who are in similar roles like you, but not in your company. When it comes to be vulnerable inside your company, the best is to think this through in a safe space externally and prepare for it, so that we don't come across as someone who's oversharing and so on. But we must have these difficult conversations. It's just about preparing for them in the best way. And when we make a mistake, we need to stand up and take ownership for it rather than hiding it. So sometimes this will be uncomfortable.
The title of your book is Executive Loneliness. Well done. Congratulations on the book. It's a very powerful book. Why do you think so many high-performing leaders feel isolated, even when they're surrounded by a lot of people?
Yeah, it is because perhaps we feel that we are given this more senior role. We are given promotion to lead people. we have the perks that comes with it. Sometimes, the higher the role, the bigger the office, the more isolated the office is. I remember that myself. One of my promotions was to a more senior title, and I received a very isolated corner office with closed doors. Suddenly I was quite far away from my team. I started to have lunch by myself because I wasn't seated with them anymore. Maybe also the colleagues are worried to go and talk to the boss. When you are on the same level, it's a different conversation as to someone who's higher. So therefore, we have to be proactive. We need to really set up team lunches, have one-on-one lunches, have the meetings, and create these opportunities to speak with our team. And I like what Bezos said to Amazon. He said, in my meetings and so on, I never speak first because I'm the boss. I always want to hear all the managers and everyone else speak first in the meeting. Because as soon as I say something, then they will conform and they will follow me. So we need to remember that as a leader, it's about, being there to listen and don't put down your foot too firmly, because then you will never hear what's on their mind.
Yeah, I think that's excellent insight, because as a leader, like you say, when you speak up, then they're going to just think, okay, I can't disagree with that. But if you let them go first, hear their opinion or their take on things, you've got a far better chance of actually hearing the truth or hearing something different to what you might have been thinking. Let's talk about your 12-week transformation model. Can you explain to us what it is and how are your clients able to make so much progress in a short period of time?
Yeah, so the way I look at this 12-week transformation models, it starts with a self-assessment, and I have a self-assessment that you can share with your listeners if you like. It's on my website, which is basically the wheel of life, where we look at all the 8 areas of our life and fill in and rate ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10 in each area. In this, then we look at business and career just as one, but the other areas then is finances, it's health, family and friends, romance, personal growth, fun and recreation, and physical environment. So this is the starting point. So I like coaching to be measurable. So we start by looking first at this is where I am today. And then we look at a desired score in each area. And then it's my job as a coach to ask questions to map out, okay, what would that look like? If your health today is a 4, then what is it? What's the reason for this 4? What are you doing? And if you want to reach a 9, what does a 9 in health look like? Well, I need to lose this amount of weight. I need to exercise more. I need to eat more. And then it's about pinpointing that and setting some measurable goals, and then the metrics to follow this. And it's beautiful these days with all the AI tools and so on. There's so much we can do. So what my coaching clients then get after 12 weeks is a full report where they can really see how they are performing. So just like you would in your work, you will have KPIs, you will have metrics, you will have targets and goals for your work. Traditionally or typically, most people don't have it in the same format for their own life. And therefore, there perhaps is no wonder why we are lost. It's almost like we're driving a car in the dark with our own life. And just imagine if we run our businesses without clear goals, without KPIs, without any plans, without something in writing and someone who's accountable, So it's about transforming how we do it for business to our own life. And that's really, many executives, they get so excited when they do this because they do it day in, day out for work. Now it's time to do it for themselves.
Right. So what I'm hearing you saying is that the role of the coach in this situation is to help the executive who might be struggling with various things in their lives or in their leadership. The coach is helping them identify the areas where they want to improve and then help to keep them accountable to achieve those goals.
Absolutely. And this accountability makes all the difference, right? Because once we set the goals and the targets, and then you have someone who will check in with you. And typically out of these 12 weeks, it's a call every week, right? So in that sense, you're adding more goals, you're adding more complexity. And as you start to tick some of the boxes, you're achieving things, you have someone also who acknowledge that, because many times for high achievers, maybe what we do for work, yes, we hit the targets, hit KPIs, and we find out that we will be maybe getting a bonus or reward. But what's there for our personal life? And many times as a high achiever, we might not realize that actually we are doing quite a lot of things and we are achieving things, but we don't know because we don't measure it. So it's about just putting this accountability system in, and then there's a chance to celebrate the wins as well.
Along the same lines about the title of your book, Executive Loneliness, how big a problem is mental health challenges for people in top leadership positions?
I'm close to a lot of them. I'm talking to therapists, counselors, psychologists. I even talk to the rehabs and so on that are working with executives. And the numbers that we are estimating is that about 30% of senior executives are suffering from isolation and feeling of loneliness. And about 10% of senior leaders are suffering from some form of addiction. Can be anything from alcohol to drug addiction, gambling, sex addiction, or anything else. And many use that as a coping mechanism. It doesn't mean that perhaps that this is affecting them too much in the work today, but eventually some problems will occur. And typically one bad habit lead to an addiction and so on. So it's a lot of things that we don't really see that is happening behind the scene.
Yes, and because people are scared to talk about it, because it's such a almost taboo topic to talk about, it's not that visible to people. But as you said, the people who's working with these kinds of leaders are able to sort of quantify. And those numbers are high. We're talking about 30%. That means every 3 in 10 is having some kind of challenge.
I was just going to say also, and then I asked a follow-up question. So if you have some mental health challenges, would you talk to your company about it? Would you tell your boss? Would you tell your HR this? 84% of the respondents that I interviewed for my book said no. So that means they will not tell anyone in the company. And then another follow-up question here is, would you seek professional help? Would you go and see a psychologist or a counselor? Still, 75% say no. So that means that you have people suffering from addictions, suffering from loneliness, suffering from mental health issues, and they are not seeking help. They're not talking about it. So that's the dark areas here.
So that clearly shows why there is such a need to raise awareness about this problem and to help people to find a safe space to talk about their challenges. Sort of along the same lines, why is community such an important part of healing and sustainable success?
The opposite of loneliness is connection, and connection comes from community. And we have to remember that we are social animals. We need community. We need connection, especially in this sort of isolated technological world when we work from home perhaps some days and we interact a lot in virtual meetings rather than meetings in person. We don't belong to as many clubs and associations as we used to. So we have to be very proactive. And when I do my coaching and training sessions, I help my coaching clients to map out what are the clubs and associations that they would like to explore. And we do this by going even deeper to look at the purpose, look at the hobbies that they used to enjoy when they were younger, perhaps before they were so busy at work. And then I encourage everyone to rejoin them. So in my case, I rejoined swim academies, running clubs, cycling groups, cycling clubs, and really to belong somewhere. We all need that kind of tribe belongingness in a healthy way. And there's more and more talk about social health now. We know that physical health is important. Then there was a lot of talk about mental health, emotional health, but a new wave now is about social health. And we need a dose of that every day.
That makes absolute sense. I think as humans, as societies, we are far more disconnected, as you said, because of things like remote work. Things have changed so much that we don't have that community anymore. And as you say, it is such an important part of us having general well-being, I guess, more than mental health being. A lot of entrepreneurs and executives might fear that slowing down will hurt their performance because, again, as you said, to be part of a social network, it sort of takes you away from your high-pressure job. What would you say to someone who believes that rest is a weakness?
Yeah, I believe that when we are sitting in front of a computer to work or when we are in a meeting, then we are a manager or an administrator. That's the level. But when we are in the gym, out for a walk, out for a run, or we are joining some club or some association, when we are socializing, then we are the CEO. Then we are at a higher level of being. Then we have that distance from the problem and we're perhaps moving our body, we're doing something. And it tend to be at those moments, perhaps in the shower after that swim academy or after that walk is when we get the solution to that problem. The big creative ideas will not happen once we are too busy. If you look at countries who are very high in creativity and where you have innovation and so happening, it is perhaps in countries where there's not so much noise. Sweden, where I come from, for example, has a lot of innovations. There is a lot of silence there. There is a lot of room for that to happen. when we are too busy, there's no room for that.
That's really interesting. So that distance to step away from the pressure that we're facing all the time is when we actually allow our brains the space to come up with a solution or the creative ideas to solve a problem. That's really interesting. So actually, slowing down is not going to hurt someone's performance. It's actually going to give them the space to probably find better solutions for things that they need to solve for. Many of our listeners are either facing personal struggles or maybe they're supporting someone who is. What's one mindset shift that can make a real difference?
Well, I would say the first mindset shift that we need to have is that it shouldn't be taboo to ask for help. Again, it's not about oversharing, but it is about thinking, okay, I'm faced with this challenge now. Who is the one or two people who I can trust, who I can talk to about this? And if there is no one in the whole world that you can think about to ask, then use AI or use a search engine to seek where is this organization that I can take this. Just to give you an example, if it's related, for example, to alcohol, I myself, when I went through a burnout period, had some problems with alcohol. If you go in and ask a search engine anywhere in the world, there will be 12-step programs, support groups, there will be recovery meetings, recovery groups all around the world, meetings happening in person every hour. There will be virtual meetings happening every hour around the world. I've been supporting some executives to quit smoking, and while we've done the individual work, they have joined some meetings online also, and these are global these days. So there's so much help, so much support out there. There's also all these helplines, hotlines, volunteers who's helping. So most often we are not the first human being ever who is facing this particular problem. So my recommendation is don't be shy to ask for help, but just reach out.
I think that's excellent advice. Just even to put your foot in the water and feel how it will be. I think many of these groups, you can be anonymous. You can join a Zoom call without putting your camera on, just to start building that community and being part of a group that's talking openly about whatever the struggle is that you're facing. I think that's very good advice. You're very accomplished. You've done a lot already. What's next for you? Do you have anything on the horizon that you're working on?
Yeah, so having done coaching now for a few years here with executives, both for them in the workplace, but also the life coaching, then I sometimes have reached the limit of what I can do as a coach, especially if it uncovers some addictions or maybe even suicidal thoughts and so on. So what I've done the last 1.5 years now is to also study to become a licensed and certified counselor and therapist. And I've just completed my course now. So I'm actually starting my line of work as a training with a supervisor so that I can support executives more. And especially if it's serious topics like burnout and so on, which is increasingly in the workplace, then coaching is not enough. So now I have that toolbox as well to be able to help more.
Congratulations. Amazing to have finished that and now be able to take a step further. Excellent. Well done.
Thank you.
Now we've come to the segment of our show where I will ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you.
Morning run, meditation, or cold plunge?
Wow, morning run all the time.
Do you have one book that changed your life?
I think The Secret by Rhonda Byrne.
Excellent. How would you describe your leadership style?
Coaching.
What does success mean to you now?
Being aligned with my values and knowing my purpose.
If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't start smoking as a teenager.
Good advice. What is one thing you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
Pray and meditate.
Lovely. Well, thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now I would like to ask you our signature green pill question. Could you share an inspiring or life-changing experience that you have gone through?
Well, the biggest life-changing experience for me was to go through burnout myself, to really, hit my rock bottom. And the way I coped at the time was to isolate myself and medicate myself with alcohol. And if you ask me, would I have it undone? No, because it's just like I needed to be burnt. I needed to go through that phase of my life. And after that, I look at life in a completely different way. We all have our own paths, and that is a big part of me. And I always say that the biggest challenges we've gone through can be our golden nugget. It's what we can help someone else with. So these days I'm there for anyone who's going through, loneliness, isolation, burnout, and alcohol or other addictions. And therefore I can feel for them, and I also can have a mutual understanding, and they feel safer with me. So that's my gift these days.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you're right. Having gone through something yourself puts you in that position where you can really talk with empathy and experience to somebody who's going through something similar or another kind of challenge, because you've got that experience that you can draw upon. Thank you so much for being here today. Your honesty, resilience, and commitment to breaking the stigma around mental health in leadership is truly inspiring. You've shown us that strength doesn't come from doing it all alone, but from having the courage to ask for help and to lead with humility. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your book and your coaching?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn. If anyone want to look me up there, it's Nick Jonsson, and it's spelled NICKJONSSON. I also have my website, which is nickjonsson.com. And finally, if someone is interested in checking out Executive Loneliness, it has its own dedicated Wikipedia page.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If Nick's story moved you, or if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share the episode, leave us a 5-star review, and subscribe to the podcast. It means a lot to us. Until next time, take care of yourself, build your tribe, and stay humble.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.